I'm peering at my screen across the room. I can't quite tell who is next.
On mine, it says Robert.
Hi, I'm Robert of Trimeris, and I'm just here to learn a little bit more.
Etienne, I think.
Hi, I'm Mistress Etienne. I'm from Ontier. I have done a lot of baronial banquets and feasts. I'm doing stuff with the Madrona Culinary Guild.
Oh, that's cool. So I can't say the next person's name, but starts
Look
with
at me. Oh,
You can go. That's perfectly fine with me.
I'm Maeve. I live in the East, but I was of Trimeris. I was co-feastcrat twice, except I came down with the crud and my co-feastcrat had to cover me once. And I am always eager to soak up more knowledge.
Maeve, I have a friend with the same name, so that's actually one that I would have been able to say, but thank you. Let's see. Friedrich?
Hi, I'm Friedrich. I've cooked a few feasts, more than 2, less than 10. I can't count the number of times that I've been people's seconds in the kitchen. That's more than 10. And most of the feasts, I tend to actually enjoy doing smaller feasts, 40 to 80 people. I've only had the opportunity to do stuff larger than 100 once. And where are you from, Friedrich? East.
Isabel?
Hi, I have feast crowded once. I've seconded another time, and I've assisted with another feast. Inwards and out. You just learn.
What kingdom are you from?
I'm sorry, Colantier.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Diana?
The official name is Diana Windallen until the change goes through. I'm from Primaris. Most everybody knows me as Wolf Mom. I have probably cooked more feasts than any of you have been to events. I've been at it for 45 years. So I have horror stories that'll curl your toes.
Thank you. Perez?
Hi, I'm Peretz Ben Meir Gershon, here in the Crown Province of Ushgar in the East Kingdom. Fairly new to the SCA. I've been cooking my entire adult life and starting dinner even before that because I was a latchkey kid. Period cooking's a little bit newer to me. I was looking forward to helping out at Feast for the first time. Actually, I think at Frederick's invitation, that got canceled with COVID. So since then, I've been taking the East Kingdom Ethereal Quartz as an excuse to try to do scattershot recipes that I've never tried before, doing probably about the equivalent of a remove for my lady and I, and have been hosting kind of cook along, like hang out with me in the kitchen while I'm doing those kinds of things. So that's been a learning process. Definitely found that like timing has been a thing that I can stand to learn more about. So yeah, I'm hoping to benefit from everybody's experience here.
Awesome. John?
John, you're on mute.
Hello. Yeah, I've done about half a dozen. I'm from Eldamere, and I specialize now. I'm trying to transition to mostly camp cooking, and I kind of specialize in high theme feasts. So, yeah, that's about everything.
Eden.
Hi there, I'm Eden of Lions Guard from Montier. I've been cooking with the Madrona Culinary Guild, running or supporting feasts for 30 years, and then in the West I was doing medieval cooking even before that.
Penn.
Hi, I'm Penn, and Lucia's over there. We're from Eldamere. We have run one feast, but that's the one where he stepped up as Baron Baroness the weekend before that feast. So we were
Ouch.
kind of busy also holding court and stuff. So yeah, it's been weird, and we haven't had a chance to run another one yet. We do day boards mostly.
Let's see. Berla.
Hi, I'm Birla. I'm in the East Kingdom. I have never even participated in an SCA feast, but I did run one feast for Hearthlight, which is another game. It's like SCA, but with foam instead of rattan and all of the metal and stuff. And I'm here to listen and learn.
Awesome. Grace, I believe you're our last one.
Grace, if you're talking, you're on mute. Oh, she's just here to listen, she says.
Okay.
I might be the person you couldn't pronounce.
In as well.
I might be the person you couldn't pronounce.
Yeah, that would be one.
I'm Boyarina, our mistress, Marina Anastasia Ozorowski from Eldamere. I have been cooking for over 32 years. I have done several feasts. I have lost count of the number. Many lunches. I participate in the Skrill cooking group. I also currently organize and edit the Eldamere Cooks calendar, which we sell as a fundraiser for our kingdom. And do lots of redaction and lots of teaching as well.
Very nice. I just realized there's several more names that I didn't see. So there's still a couple of you left that I hadn't introduced yourself. Flora?
Flora, you're on mute.
Thank you. Lady Flora de la Vega, formerly of Atlantia. I've also cooked in a bit in the Mid-Realm and the East. Been kitchen support. I've done some events like non-SCA that I've led, but mostly been kitchen support in SCA kitchens. So I'm just here to listen and learn. And my involvement of late has been a little limited, so, but I still would love to learn from you all. Thank you.
Moon?
Hi, I'm Moon. I'm from Callantyre. I helped with lots and lots of stuff over like 30 years, so just kind of listening in to see if I hear anything new.
Isabel?
That might be our Isabel, and if she is, she might be hopping between rooms because she's also a coordinator with me.
Okay. Who else do we got?
I think Anna?
Hi, I'm in the Middle Kingdom, and I have no experience with feasts, so I'm looking forward to learning.
Great, welcome. Marianne?
Hi, I'm from Avacall. I haven't run a medieval feast, only done mundane type stuff, and I'm hoping to pick up some tips on how to run a feast when you don't actually have kitchen facilities.
Oh, that's a good question.
In there.
Great. Ishmael?
Pray for lots of plugins.
Ishmael, if you're talking, you're on mute. Maybe they're shy this afternoon.
think that's everyone.
Nope.
Nope.
One more. I'm Evelyn. I'm currently of Callantyr, and I spent 15 years in Mid-Realm, and that's where I started cooking. And then I came back to Callantyr, so now I'm in Callantyr. And I did Feast of Eagles a couple of years ago.
So, did we miss anybody? Okay, well, I think that we got everybody then, Aubrey.
Looks like.
I can't quite see what somebody just posted in the chat.
So some sites don't even have lots of plugins. Think equestrian areas.
So since that was brought up, let's maybe start there. I know some of us have had to deal with trying to cook feast with no kitchen amenities at all. That happened to me on my second feast. We lost our site 2 weeks before the event and had to relocate to a site that was just basically a large field with some RV spots and not really running water, but just basically some RV spots in a giant open field. And we basically had to build a kitchen based out of what we could cobble together. We had somebody bring in their electric or gas-powered smoker. We had lots of propane, 2 propane burner cooktops, the ones up on a stand that use the giant propane tanks. One of our members luckily had a portable shop sink that we were able to hook up to one of the RV pads that we had running water to at least attempt somehow to be clean and sanitary. And lots of pop-up tents with folding tables and whatever else we could manage to plug into an RV pad's, utility pole and not blow the circuit. And lots of help and coolers full of ice to keep the cold things cold so that we didn't food poison anybody. And this was doing a 5-course German feast. So it was definitely a challenge. But I think you have to, if it happens, you really have to look at what you have, and then you have to reach out to your barony, your shire, your kingdom, and find out who has what that you could possibly use to make do. And you may have to revisit your menu and figure out what you can actually cook based on what you have. It worked out for us that his smoker was large enough that we could basically use it as an oven, not as a smoker. So I don't know, I know a couple other people mentioned that they've had to deal with the same thing. So maybe if you want to talk, do use the raise your hand function, and we'll kind of go through and call on you. But if somebody's got some other tidbits that they might want to offer about things that they found useful or what they did. Your Excellency?
Our last Crown Feast was actually an all outdoor feast, and it was we had plugins, but we didn't realize it, so we didn't plan to use them. We did a lot of when we looked at when I looked at the menu, took that into account. Most frozen vegetables, like if you buy your vegetables pre-frozen, say for Costco or something, a good dunk and a vat of hot water will really help to finish cooking those quickly. So that was a lifesaver, and we just basically dressed them with butter and a little salt and pepper, and they flew out of the kitchen. We also did a lot of pre-cooking. We used the seal meal bags, and we pre-cooked. We had one propane stove with us and a couple of fairly big stock pots. So what we did is when we pre-cooked, a cooler will not only keep things cold, it will also keep things hot and help you to warm things. So if you have things like little bite-sized meatballs or even say drumsticks, things like that for a chicken, if you put them in that cooler and you heat your water to pretty close to boiling and pour it in and rotate that till you get it up to temperature, it will hold your temperature for you. So pre-cooking and using those coolers that you have, because you're going to have the coolers to take stuff anyway, you might as well utilize them when you need to keep things hot and to serve. That way it also keeps things clean as well. You know, if you're in that rustic setting, you're going to have your 3-sink method in tubs or something, but especially in a horse barn, you're going to want to try to keep things as sanitary as you can between the horses and the flies that like to visit the horses and different things. But yeah, and so we used the coolers a lot. We looked at our menu a lot. And, you know, when you're looking at your menu, there are, you know, cold compote dishes and things like that that can go out as well. So, but yeah. So.
Yeah, that's good, because coolers can basically double as basically a hot box.
Mm-hmm.
So you just dump the ice out, and you can line it with towels for insulation, and then you basically have yourself your own little hot box. But that's a good thing too, is that if you know from ahead of time that you're going to be cooking in a site with no facilities, then you really have to be careful in the dishes that you pick. You know, you can't really do a very ambitious menu where you're going to need, you know, a 6-burner stove and 2 convection ovens to pull that off. So you really have to be mindful that your menu fits your venue. Does anybody else want to chime in?
I was going to say, dry ice is your friend. People think in terms of putting ice in your coolers to take your stuff to site. But if you're looking at a site where all of your food has to stay in your cooler and it can't go into a fridge, then you really want to utilize dry ice, because it'll keep frozen stuff frozen for a couple of days, and then you don't have to worry about stuff thawing and getting salmonella because it thawed too soon. So dry ice is something to keep track of. Oops. There we go.
We have somebody raise their hand that they wanted to chip in.
Yeah. Last year I assisted with Fiondel's feast at Known World Cooks and Bards, and she went all out, and we had some things brought in that I didn't even know existed. Abbatissa brought in a propane oven, and that was just life-changing. I mean, it's a camp oven. She made bread all day. We made a lot of fritters. I know I spent hours frying fritters, but the turkey fryers are fantastic, and it really made a big difference. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and turkey fryers can double as basically a giant stock pot. You know, you use the propane burner as a cooktop, basically.
Something else to think of too are your numbers. If you're having to do feast for 100 people versus feast for 20 people, it's a big difference. If you've got a smaller group like 20 to 30 people, you can cook over an open fire, because that's actually my area of specialization. And you can cook over an open fire, feed 20 to 30 people, no problem. But if you're trying to do a full feast for 100, 150, that's no longer really a feasible option if you're just working with a small group of people and 1 or 2 fire pits. So that's something else to look at, is how many people are you feeding and what all's in your menu.
Right, in some places, you know, especially here in Trimaris, if it's a dry summer, you may not be allowed to have a ground fire. You may only be able to use above ground. So you may only be limited to whatever propane cooking services that you can bring into the site. So that's another thing is, you know, can you do in-ground fires, or are you limited to just above ground?
Well, all of my fire pits are above ground, but yeah, you have a point. You can't do a whole roasted pig in a pit cook if you can't dig into the ground. So yeah, that's something else.
Something else to consider that I only just discovered, I've been breaking the law nonstop for 20 plus years. Local county rules regarding bringing pre-made food to a site, and especially things like partially made food to a site. If you've been planning on cooking part of a dish at home, bringing it to site and finishing it on site for a situation like this, our county actually does not allow that. And I literally only just found that out last month. And we've been doing it for years. Even though we've been doing it very safely, nobody's ever been poisoned in any way. It just happens to be illegal. So it is worth your time to explore what the rules are for food safety where you're going to be cooking.
Good thoughts. Gavin?
I was just going to tag off of what Eden was saying, that I wonder if that is referring only to businesses, because I know from a business perspective, from a mundane commercial perspective, like caterers and stuff cannot cook at home. It has to be cooked in a commissary kitchen. So I kind of wonder if that's what you're falling into, which I did not think would apply to what we're doing. But I agree, definitely look into that.
Mom?
Well, as I say, dealing with that same thing, we have found that the health department is county by county. So that's probably where that's falling into, is some counties are going to apply those rules only to businesses. Some counties are going to apply those to everyone. I have a small business, but if I'm going to sell food at certain county fairs, I have to have it prepared in a commercial kitchen. And that may be what they're looking at, is that it doesn't matter if it's a small business, if it's a 501(c) like the SCA is, anybody is going to fall under those same rules. So that's a health department thing. So definitely I agree. If you're going to be cooking somewhere that's not private property, contact the health department for that county and find out what their rules are.
I can actually chime in on that a little. A lot of those things actually fall under rules for farmers markets and fundraisers, whereas you can cook without having to be in a commercial kitchen like twice a year. I know like Kansas, most states, it's like twice a year you can do a fundraiser, grill out on grills, things like that, because you don't have to worry about being in a commercial kitchen. It's when you're selling and doing other things that becomes then it becomes a commercial aspect. For cases of like feasts for SCA, it's a really weird gray area. Usually most of the places you're going to use their kitchen is already considered commercial because it has the separated sinks, things like that. That's why most kitchens in like churches and other sites that we'll use, they look industrial, is because they're set up to be that way. That way they can do other stuff. It's when you get into it where you're doing it all the time from the same place, that's when you get into the real issues. But yeah, definitely checking with like not only the county health department, but sometimes just the ag agents who run like the farmers markets and represent them. They can tell you what sites are already cleared to be used, so you don't have to worry.
Wolf Mom, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, one of the things that we discovered here in Crossra is the county has different interpretations for different things. It depends on what kind of mood the guy is in as to how he interprets what your function is. So ideally what they really want to say is that if it's a private function, you're on your own. If you are, like, if you're doing a demo at a fighter practice at a county park, you can't give anybody your food. Weird. But I think there's a lot of interpretation depending on what park guy or girl is present in the park that day. Because I haven't been able to find anything in writing anywhere.
All right, so I'm going to put out a question to our folks who have not had the opportunity to do a feast yet. Give us a question or something that you've always, or that you've been wondering about. I know we've got quite a few of us here who have done feasts. But for those of you who haven't done one yet, what's sort of one of your biggest questions or things that you'd like some more information about? Now everybody's quiet. If you're trying to talk, remember you're on mute, so unmute yourself. Or rate you.
Sorry, I'm in motion, but I actually had something for this. If nobody else wants to go first. So as I mentioned in the intro, with just making multiple dishes at home, what I have occasionally run into is I've messed up timing of things, and something is ready to go to the next stage before I'm ready to address it, and then it messes up the dish, or it draws attention away from something else. And I'm only doing 3-4 dishes, so maybe a remove's worth. So when you're doing these multiple remove kind of things, how do you think about where you place in your, this needs to be done at this time, this needs to be done at this time, so that when everything comes out and at scale, it is at the right temperature, it is not dried out, all those kinds of things, because that's a lot more management than just making something from a recipe.
So Friedrich is over there frantically waving his hand. So I'll let him go first, and then I think I saw, if you want to click your raise your
Okay.
hand so that
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what I was taught to do, and I've been doing ever since, is I get ridiculously overplanned. I literally have taped up in at least one place in the kitchen, if not two, a complete timeline. The timeline basically includes every single dish I'm making, when I need to start the prep, when I need to get stuff on the fire. I have things like when I need to boil water, and I actually do it in a spreadsheet. The reason why I do it in a spreadsheet is because inevitably things go wrong. Like you go into the kitchen and discover 50% of your ovens aren't working. And by doing it on a paper spreadsheet that is literally usually taped over the refrigerator, I can make adjustments as I go along. And basically when I walk into that kitchen on the day of the feast, I'm like, okay, this is when things need to hit. This is when things need to come out. And if I'm working in a small kitchen, like this is what I know can survive in a steam table. And it's all planned out.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Inevitably, something will go south. It's just part of it. But because you have the plan, you can adapt.
Yeah, I use spreadsheets, and they're in 15-minute increments. And so, it really starts with planning. It really going back to planning feast from start to finish. And so when you're making your timeline, you've got to account in for everything, even from chopping vegetables to boiling water. So you've really got to assign everything a time, and then plug that into your timeline. And depending on when you want to start serving, I work backwards from that, factoring in cooking time. So if you know that you want to serve something at 7, but it takes 3 hours of cooking, and then you've got to factor in plating. So it's really more than just picking out recipes. It's sitting down and seeing how all those recipes work together and assigning every task a time frame, a time amount, and then plugging that into your timeline so that you are accounting for all of that.
So can I toss one more thing in?
Sure.
When you're making the timeline, I'm not a professional cook, and it's just me and my wife. So most of the time I'm cooking things small. One of the things, as crazy as it sounds, is get the biggest pot. Like go and get yourself a big pot or borrow one from your Barony. Take the thing, fill it 2/3 or 3/4 of the way for the water, and find out how much time it's going to take the water to boil. Because there are things that take time in large scale that are you think of as much faster in a small scale. And if you're doing stuff over a fire, like do that as well, because yeah, you can end up things as like, oh, it only takes me 15 minutes for water to boil, and you're sitting there an hour later with this huge pot waiting for it to boil.
Aubrey, did you see who had their hand up next?
I had something. Did you say Robert or Aubrey?
No, I was saying if you had seen who had their hand up next. I know I saw a couple of hands go up.
I'm not seeing any right now.
Mine was.
Okay.
Eden. Mine was. Just echoes a bit, but when I cook a feast, I actually test every single recipe in my home. I pre-cook it a few months in advance or a few weeks in advance, and that gives me a sense of the timing of what it is I'm cooking, what needs to be done. Helps me determine also, because I do freeze, microwave, and reheat test on every single dish. and I will set portions aside and just do extra little tests to see, what can be cooked the day of and what is going to be pre-cooked in advance and what needs reheating. Like everybody else, I do keep some spreadsheets for myself, but also on the day of the event, I buy a huge honking piece of Bristol board usually, or we get a really big piece of paper somewhere. And often we have that posted so that everybody coming into the kitchen can see at a glance. They can turn from their workstation, they can see the writing, it's large. Okay, we need to get this chopped, we need to get this water on to boil at this time. So that also helps everybody in the kitchen so they're not all clustering around with their little finger going along the line on the fridge. And we found that really helps here in some of the kitchens that I've cooked in.
Did we miss anybody who wanted to offer some advice for people about timing?
I wanted to just add also, in addition to, of course, that everything takes longer, like chopping meat that takes 2 seconds to chop up enough meat for a single pie takes 3 hours when you're doing it for 150 people. But on our spreadsheets, the other thing we track is resources like your ovens. Do you have enough ovens to cook all the things? Because if it's all pie all the time, you need a lot of ovens. But also, we track our food processors. If you have 2 different dishes that need to be cooking using the food processors at the exact same time, you need to know you have enough of them, things like that. Every single detail gets on that spreadsheet.
Absolutely. Wolf Mom? I'm going to switch cameras and try and get closer so that I can monitor the chat too. See if I can switch my camera around. So I'm going to disappear for a second.
I'm old school, so I don't use a spreadsheet because you're right. Doing this, going across, drives me insane on feast day. So what I have is task lists by 1 hour increments, and they're straight down. They're just lots of pieces of paper straight down. And as everybody completes a task, there's a marker there and they mark it out. That's done, move on. And I tell people that they really need to learn to think in the terms of man hours instead of how long is this going to take me? Well, if you test a dish at home and the prep for one batch for 4, 6, or 8 people takes 45 minutes to an hour, don't put it in your feast because you can now multiply that by 8. And that's what you're going to have to come up with in man hours to get the job done on site. And for a lot of people, that thinking in man hours, some people can't do it. I'm a logistician, so thinking in man hours is natural for me. And that's how I think all of my testing and everything is all done by man hours required. And it's easier that way for me.
Yeah, it really goes back to when you're planning your menu. You have to look at the site that you're using and see what amenities are available to you. Like somebody, I think Eden had mentioned, if you only have one oven and you want to do a feast o' pies, it's not going to happen unless you're doing cold pies that can be served room temperature that you're cooking off site and schlepping to the site. It's not going to happen. So when you're looking at your menu, you've really got to figure out what do I have available for me to cook with. And then if you've got back-to-back courses that you need to heat up and they all need to be in the oven, well, you may want to rearrange your courses to account for the fact that you need that oven for X amount of time for this course, but I also need it for this dish I want to do as well.
So that's something that I was going to address with talking about timing and y'all, having lists or having spreadsheets or however you organize your timing. Something else to look at is your timing of your equipment. If you only have one food processor, but you need to use it for course 1 and course 2 and course 3, well, that affects when you start each one of those courses because you can't start them all 3 at the same time if you need that food processor for all 3. And I think that's one of the hardest things to look at when you're talking about timing, because it's one thing to go, okay, it takes 45 minutes to prep this dish. It takes an hour to cook. I'm serving feast at 6, so I have to start it at 4. But if you've got 4 different things using that one piece of equipment, well, then I can't start dish 1 at 4. I've got to start it at noon in order to get everything done by 6. And then you deal with the how do you keep things that you've cooked earlier in the day warm if they're supposed to be warm. So yeah, looking at the equipment goes into your timing too, and that's one thing people tend to forget.
And there's one other thing that people aren't usually prepared for. Some cooks will happily pull together a team, and those are the people they're going to cook with the day of their event. They know how many people they want in the kitchen. They know the size of the kitchen. They know how they can skirt around. But there's always new people or other people who want to come into the kitchen the day of and they want to help. And I have actually had this experience where we brought somebody into the kitchen, and this person we asked them to chop vegetables because that's what we had to do at the time. This person was incredibly slow, which threw my schedule off a little bit. We had to have other people come in and work away on that because at that point I hadn't done the whole pre-selection. It's like, yeah, whoever wants to come on in. We had a couple of other people, we knew what we were doing. So you have to factor in sometimes that you might have little hiccups, and how are you going to compensate for that? So think of the team that you're bringing in to help you cook your feast the day of as well. And again, that goes back to how much pre-work do you have to put in before you go to your event? How much prep do you have to have ready so you can grab and go if you need to? So things like that do consider it all, because there's ways of making it easier on yourself and your staff.
Friedrich, I think you had your hand up first, and then Eden will get to you.
Just following up on what Mrs. Mariana said, especially if it is a large feast and you have many people in the kitchen, as the head cook, be really, really hesitant about assigning yourself any of the prep tasks because you're going to be a manager. Chef and chief are the same word. And so your job is going to be to okay, that really well-meaning person who's slow, you're going to put that on something that's not, you're going to adjust them to something that's not time sensitive. You're going to, where do your rock, I refer to them as the rocks in the kitchen. There's 4 or 5 of us who all work together. We all know our own pacings. What are they going to be doing? I've got people who need supervision. There's going to be people who it's here's my recipe, make it happen by this time, and it's going to happen. It's going to be beautiful. And so on the day of, keep yourself as the manager, not necessarily as a cook.
Yeah, that is a very good point, because if you are the head cook, it's amazing the amount of cooking that you do not do, because you are really being, the wrangler of everybody who's coming in to try and help you and keeping everybody on schedule. So you will be surprised at the amount of cooking that you actually get to do. Then you don't want to tie yourself down, because inevitably you're going to assign yourself some task where you have to focus, and you're going to have 3 people, 4 people asking you questions, and you're gonna, your attention needs to be free roaming so that you can kind of help everybody. Eden?
I just wanted to add that one of the things we do is we build in a couple of tasks because we are a volunteer organization. It is super important to us that anybody who walks into our kitchen and says, hi, I want to help, we always have to say yes. If somebody wants to help, we want to encourage people to start playing in the kitchen and build up the next generation of people to play in the kitchen. So we always have to say yes. So we always have whoever's in charge, a list of tasks in our head of, yeah, this one I can totally hand to somebody new. And if they're a little slow, that's okay. If they're speed demons, great, we'll hand them another task.
Yeah, I do the same thing. You always have that list of easy tasks that when somebody says, I want to help, you're like, here you go.
Yeah.
And dishes. Dishes always need to be done.
Dishes always, yes. We did have one question in chat. I'm monitoring chat here. Grace was asking about cooking in garb. And whether you do it, and some concerns about shoes and being cool. I definitely cook in garb, but I think Gavin will get to you afterwards. I cook in garb, but you have to be smart about the garb that you're cooking in. You're gonna be in a hot kitchen all day. So make sure you have a good pair of shoes on. Nobody's gonna see your feet. So make sure you have good supportive shoes on. You don't need to be wearing, period shoes. But a simple linen tunic that's going to be, not long floppy sleeves, like what I'm cooking in today, short sleeves, simple linen tunic, that is going to breathe. It's not going to be holding in sweat like polyester, and an apron. So you're basically in garb. My persona is South Asian Indian. So normally I'm in my saris and jewelry and pearls everywhere. But when I'm in the kitchen, I'm in a simple linen tunic and a pair of supportive shoes that my feet aren't going to die in. Gavin?
You basically said everything that I was going to say. When I go in the kitchen, it's my very first tea tunic from when I joined the SCA. I still have it. It still works great. It's faded, but it's perfect for the kitchen.
Yep.
It's short sleeve. If I spill something on it, I'm not worried about it. And it's comfortable, breathes, because those are the things that, it does get hot in the kitchen, so you don't want to wear multiple layers. Or I saw someone in a kitchen with a hoopla on trying to do dishes, and I don't understand how they did it. But
yeah, no, put your hair up, or put a sort of a wrap around your head to collect sweat. Get your hair out of your face, up off your neck. Wear comfy shoes. So period is sort of less worrisome in the kitchen. If I were, I'm a girl, so I have a long tunic, a long dress on, but the hem comes up around my ankle so that I'm not tripping over my hem all the time. I don't know if anybody else wants to chip in about some things that they do for working while in garb.
Yep. Yeah. So like Gavin's coif, I've got a couple of those. Those are great for the kitchen. What you can actually do is you can take the bands, just pull them back up behind your head, tie them, and you now have a do-rag.
Yep.
And it keeps the sweat out of your food, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And yes, just like everybody said, I have a tunic. It started as my good linen tunic, my good linen Viking tunic. I went into a kitchen, I did some helping, and it ended up as my kitchen tunic, and it's been so for years.
Your Excellency.
So, the other thing is, I don't know if this was mentioned because I dropped away. If you're going to help in a kitchen, go and bring a bunch of your own knives, your own tools, and your own thermometer. I don't know how many times I've walked into a kitchen, and I know it's not period, but people are like, is the roast done? And I pull out my thermometer and hand them to them. For a food safety standpoint, it's really, really good. Maybe bring a box of gloves. I mean, our barony has a lot of this. I mean, we went and made sure that we bought good knives, but you don't know what you're walking into. And if you bring stuff that you're comfortable with, you're likely to be safer, you're likely to cause less problems, and you may be freeing up limited resources for people who just walked in off the street.
And bring an oven thermometer, or one for each oven, because what it says on the dial and what it is inside the oven are often two totally different things. You can end up with raw chicken if you trust that dial.
Yeah. Your Excellency, I think you had you wanted something to chip in.
Oops, I hit the wrong button. Yeah, a couple of things. A lot of times, exactly, wear the camp tunic. I'm going really lazy today. I've got a camp tunic on. And if you have a long tunic, you wear a belt, reach down about where your hands go, gather up the material, bring it up and tuck it into your belt. It'll keep it out of your way. It'll keep you cooler in the kitchen. One of my tricks is that you never know when you're going to get called out of the kitchen for whatever. And that's when you get concerned of, oh my goodness, what's my garb look like? I always keep I always wear a dress that a tunic that I can let down to cover my shoes. And if you really want to make sure, I'll just throw a sideless surcoat by the door, because it's nothing like, you just pick up that sideless surcoat as you go out that door. If you feel like you might need to be a little more presentable than camp garb or your first tunic, put a sideless surcoat or a coat by that door and just slide into it right as you skip out the door.
Perez?
I just wanted to throw a quick addendum to what Friedrich was talking about as far as bringing your own knives, because I hadn't thought about this in terms of cooking. This is going to be particular to where you are. I'm in New York City, which has very strict knife laws generally. And as people who are volunteering and bringing these things, especially if you're like me and you're public transit bound to and from events, and not a licensed cook that can show I work at a place that justifies me having this on me. Just make sure that you know what the situation with carrying any kind of a blade beyond a certain length is, where you are, where you're transporting, because New York City, they're very strict about that sort of thing. And especially if that's not like in a locked case in the trunk of your car, they're going to call that a per se weapon. So maybe not something that a lot of people think about, but especially if you're in an urban area where those laws are more likely to be on the books, be aware of what they might be. Really
That's
great
really good,
resource
yeah.
for that is Knife Up is a website that tracks local knife laws by state and county. So you can look those things up as well.
That's really good. I wouldn't have thought of that. I have a tackle box where I keep extras that I bring to events, so that if somebody comes in and wants to help, they don't have a knife with them. So I keep extras on me, but I don't think that's something we here in Trimaris would have to have worried about or dealt with. So that's really good information.
Oh yeah, labels. That's a great idea, because I've been in lots of kitchens where I bring my own stuff because I know the kitchen never
Yes.
has enough. And then you are like, wow, is this mine? I know which ones are mine, but other people doing dishes, helping me pack up, they're not going to know my stuff from the kitchen stuff. So labels are a great idea.
Yeah, I was going to say our next question would be, Berla had a question about some tips and tricks on how you organize your kitchen and how you keep things organized. So just some ideas or tips that we have learned over the years for keeping ourselves organized in kitchens.
One thing I said real quick was that, especially for like Penzic or Gulf War or some sort of camping event like that where you're cooking, big Ziploc bags are your friends. Not necessarily for your equipment per se, because you'll use the same knife multiple times, but if you can bag your meals, all the ingredients for breakfast in one bag and all the ingredients for lunch, that way you're not going through. And I was at a cooking class at Gulf War one time, and one of the ingredients that was supposed to be for dinner had gotten used with the lunch class because it wasn't labeled, and somebody just reached in the cooler and grabbed it and they didn't know. So having things labeled or divided up by, I'm a big fan of Ziploc bags and dividing things up by meal that way. So that's my suggestion.
Anybody else got some tips or tricks for keeping yourselves organized? Wolf Mom?
When I do a feast, I go through, and anything that has a spice blend that's not going to be used until on site, I do a lot of pre-prep. I take that and I have little Tupperware containers that on my recipe, I note on it, spices, green tub. And then I write on the top of the tub what course that's for and what dish. And that way you don't have to bring your whole spice box with you. You just blend together the spices that you need for each dish and put them in little containers. And that's all that has to go with you, and it works great.
Yeah, it really does work.
Great one. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Aubrey.
Tic Tac containers make great size containers for pre-measured spices, because then you can label it by whatever meal. And most dishes, unless you're preparing for 150 or more, are not going to have more spices in that one dish than can go in a Tic Tac container.
Yeah, especially if you are limited on space, you really don't need to be dragging out every giant jar of spices that you own. Pre-measure it out and put it in a smaller container and save space. Okay, looks like we got some people hopping out to head off to other classes.
I know that it's close to that hour, but if people want to stay, I have this room reserved until right at 2 o'clock. I have a 2 o'clock class, so we could go to 1:45 if folks are wanting to.
I don't have another one scheduled until almost 4 o'clock, so I'm here. Who wants to tell horror stories about kitchens?
Oh, that would be my very first feast. This was in Oldenfeld, and I had only ever done fundraiser lunches, which granted, we did large fundraiser lunches, but I did my first feast for our barony's 10th anniversary. And if anybody has been to, some of our Tremarians who are on here, to Oldenfeld's Kitchen, Indian Springs was somewhat rustic at the best of times. And in my naivete, I said to the event steward, ha ha ha, wouldn't it be funny if we did 10 courses for the Barony's 10th anniversary, one course for every year? And she went, oh my God, that's a great idea. We're going to do that. And I was, okay. Unbeknownst to us, the camp was undergoing some severe management issues, and we always go do a walkthrough beforehand. We got to the kitchen probably about 3 weeks before the event, and it was trashed. When I say trashed, I mean pots in the sink with mold growing in them, dirt and filth everywhere, mouse droppings in the pantry. The propane line was so eroded and broken down that the propane company refused to fill the tank and turn the gas on for fear that the line was going to rupture. And I had a 10-course feast due in 3 weeks. So we spent like an entire 4 hours there scrubbing the kitchen down to the point where we were taking the hose from the sink over by the Hobart and spraying the walls to get the filth off the walls. They had to come in and hook up a commercial electric range to the middle of the kitchen because the gas range was basically not working because they had no power. Somebody had to bring in a portable giant propane tank so that we could have hot water. We had to basically use every crock pot, every electric roaster that we could find. We had to go scrub off their decrepit, terrible looking grill out the back so that we could cook meat on it. And it was, bless their souls for the people who came and helped in the kitchen, but we pulled off that 10-course feast like it was nobody's business, and hot food went out hot and cold food went out cold. Now, it required a lot of pre-planning, and I had to have, my friends' freezers were full of stuff that we had pre-cooked and stashed in her freezer. But yeah, it was a nightmare. I mean, we had mice and nesting in the bathroom, in the toilet paper dispensers. It was a nightmare.
I think you win the horror stories. And I'm Isabel, by the way. My very first feast was at a church that our shire didn't use very often. And we were promised access to the kitchen. We were promised, access to all the cooking supplies. We went and toured it beforehand. Oh yeah, it'll all be available. We get there. Oh no, that's all locked up. We can't we can get into the kitchen, but none of the kitchen supplies, no pots, no pans. So, one of our shire members, now luckily we're in a fairly metropolitan area. We're in the Kansas City, Kansas area. And we were only half an hour from where a lot of us live. So someone had to run home, bring pots and pans, and bring them to site. Also, when we did the shopping, I had planned everything with regular couscous. Well, the group that went to that grocery store bought ball couscous, which is a lot larger. That I didn't know it existed. So the night before, I'm Googling how to cook this. Also, the commercial stove, which I'd never really cooked on a commercial stove. It's a very different beast than a kitchen stove. And so I put this ball couscous on it. It says to brown it. Cool, I can do that. Put some oil in the pan, crisp it. It immediately started to burn. And all the couscous I have is in this giant pan. So I thank God there's a hotel pan. I grabbed this hotel pan, or maybe it was a half hotel pan. I take the whole thing and put it in the pan. We spent 45 minutes picking burnt couscous out of the couscous. The sink overflowed. My very first feast. why have I done more after that? But it went well.
My first 2 feasts were like that. I mean, it was crazy. It became a running joke among my group that if I had a fully functioning kitchen to work with, I wouldn't know what to do with myself, because my first 3 feasts were no kitchen at Camp Indian Springs. The second one was the German feast, outdoors with no facilities. And then the third one was I was supposed to be mentoring a friend who got food poisoning the night before, basically when we're supposed to be prepping everything. I had to kick him out of the kitchen, and all I had was a handwritten single piece of paper with his dishes on it, and I had to do his feast. The bottom of the sink, like the where the pipe was, basically dropped off. And so water was just pouring out of the sink. So I'm just like, yeah, if I had a fully functioning kitchen, I was just like, at this point, stick me on a raft in the middle of a lake with a Bic lighter and a fork, and I'll make it happen.
Isabel, you need to tell them about the fire system going off.
Did the fire system go off?
You in the system with Gwen, kitchen with Gwen when that happened?
No, that was before my time. You're talking about the Vertigo site.
Yes.
I have heard that story.
2 hours before feast, the whole fire extinguisher system went off.
And everything out was covered. This happened to my Laurel.
Oh, I used to work at McDonald's, and we had a kid who accidentally on purpose set off the fire suppression system, and the mess that creates.
Oh my gosh.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, that's being closed for a day.
Yeah, we had to shut down the restaurant and just scrape it off of everything.
I also ran a feast where I hurt my foot so bad I thought I had a compression fracture. I kept walking on it for another 7 hours until someone in my kitchen caught me crying because it hurt so bad, and they grounded me and they made me sit for the rest of the day, which was really difficult.
So I'm going to throw out a question that is like Philomena and Wolf Mom are not allowed to answer, because this is I'm curious how other kingdoms do it, and we're all from Trimaris. In Trimaris, we have hall stewards who kind of organize servers and everything, and I'm curious how other kingdoms do it and tricks that you guys might have for making sure that goes off without a hook. Because I've seen a lot lately in Trimaris where you get a hall steward who doesn't know what they're doing, so that's a struggle. Or you have a hard time getting servers, so that's a struggle.
So I can answer for Onsteora. We have a feast coordinator, server coordinator, which is the same idea. Someone in charge of the servers, someone in charge of making sure that they go to the right tables, and they pick the person who goes to head table. So technically the feastocrat doesn't have to be involved in any of that, other than it's your job to find that overall coordinator. So you definitely want to pick someone that you know knows what they're doing. If you have somebody who's like, hey, I'd really like to be your server coordinator this time, but I've never done it before, then that involves sitting down with them ahead of time, talking about your expectations. And even with someone who knows what they're doing, you want to sit down with them, before feast is ready and go, okay, here's the pacing, here's what you're going to have to do. These plates go on to the table and stay. These bowls go onto the table, but then have to come back because I need them 2 courses away. That's a lot of the coordinating aspect, and we get to them ahead of time and say, here's what's going on. As far as serving, we usually don't have issues getting servers, but then our servers are fed for free. So we have tons of kids, because this is one way the kids really can help. They do the drinks, so that way we don't have to worry about them dropping a bowl of food or a plate of whatever. They take pictures of water and tea or whatever you've made for drinks around. They do the drinks, and then you have the adults serving the food. But since the servers get to eat for free, we usually don't have any issues with getting enough people to be servers.
Trimaris is the same way. I mean, we do use kids for drinks, and the servers eat for free too. But I'm with Gavin. We seem to have lately trouble getting people to want to volunteer to be servers, even though they get to eat for free. I was curious if
Calentiers,
other kingdoms have that same problem.
Right, we usually have too many people.
I wish.
so Calentier is pretty much the same way. A lot of times we'll have a sign up for servers at the head table, but at gate. One thing I personally do, and if you were in Lady Sabina's feast helper class, as she says, she has a blood pact to be my hall steward anytime I run a kitchen. And we work together, and she knows, how to do it, and she keeps me sane. Incidentally, when I'm at a list table, she's also my herald. So just in general, we work really well together. But you just very much the same. You try to have a hall steward that knows how you're working. Incidentally, in the Shire that I'm in, my first couple of feasts, I didn't know that was a thing until I started working in some of the larger feasts in my kingdom. So that was very interesting. Just having someone out there to, maybe you prep the first plate of food or the first tray, and then they just copy it for you. That kind of thing. And that's something really important. If you are really particular on how you want something plated, you do one, and then they just copy.
Yeah, I've done that before too.
And that's really helpful.
I've even gone so far as to I will map out and make diagrams of how I want stuff plated.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know I'm anal retentive sometimes about my feasts, but I have very specific ideas for for how I want something plated. So I will actually draw out diagrams and be I want it plated like this. And sometimes things have to change based on what servingware you end up having because something else cracked or broke or whatever. But yeah.
See, for us, we plate it in the kitchen ourselves. The person in charge of servers doesn't do any of the plating unless, we ask them to. But so, yeah, you have to have someone that will plate it the way you want it, or you plate it all yourself.
So this is actually interesting. There was this feast a couple years ago that another friend of ours did. She's actually monitoring another class right now, Mistress Derode. And Mistress Eleonora and I were helping her in the kitchen that day, and we were plating the food that was going out, and we found out, I played something, and then things had moved, and I moved back, and it turns out that we were going behind each other, moving stuff without realizing we were doing that. And so we were okay, nope, you do this, I do that. It was just kind of funny. No one was upset over it. It was just kind of funny.
And as for our hall steward, it just depends on the hall steward, and it depends on the person in charge of the feast. I am also one of those people, I want to check every single plate before it goes out. I need to make sure everything looks okay. So the kitchen staff plates more than the hall steward. Then there are people who the hall steward, they're just fine. Just go ahead and put it on there. Go ahead and get it out, that kind of thing. Because I'm a little more particular on presentation. Because like Philomena said, I get this place where I get this vision, and this is what I want it to look like, and that's sometimes the only thing that will make me happy.
Yeah, I usually try and have an expediter, and then I have somebody who's in charge of the serving, and then I have a hall steward. So I usually try and have 3 separate people for those positions and not the same person, because you don't want the person who's your hall steward to have to also be trying to wrangle your servers and corral them if they're having to announce the courses. So I try to have those be 3 separate people.
Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else have a question that they want to have the group riff on and chat about? How do you guys? Go ahead, Maeve.
How do you all feel about cooking ahead? I had one person, I will not name them because all you Torneros people know who it is, very vehemently say that they did not believe in cooking ahead, and they didn't like people who cooked ahead because they didn't want to eat anybody's leftovers.
I'm sorry. If you see the state of some of the kitchens that we have to use, you're dealing with limited, yes, it is a commercial kitchen, but you're dealing with, in some cases, limited facilities or amenities that you have to use. And if you're serving 5 courses, you've become a caterer, and you cannot cook 5 courses in the amount of couple of hours that you're in that kitchen. So cooking ahead, if it's not going to compromise the integrity of the dish, I see absolutely nothing wrong with cooking something ahead that you can make ahead, stick in the freezer, and safely reheat or thaw out on site. I have done it all throughout all of my feasts. Wolf Mom, I'll let you pipe in. I have done it all throughout my feasts, and it is a lifesaver because you cannot, if you don't have a crew of 12 people coming with you to cook, and you've got one commercial stove with 6 burners, you can't pull off a 5-course feast in the course of 8 hours. Not unless you are Harry Potter and you can wave a magic wand. So pre-cooking is the way to go, man. I'm all for it. Wolf Mom?
I have friends who are feastcrats who go, oh, but it won't be fresh. And I believe in cooking everything fresh. Of course, what you get from them is dinner, not a feast. You get dinner. You get some sort of salady thing that they've thrown together with a dressing of some sort. And then you might get a hunk of chicken and some rice that they've cooked on site and some canned vegetables that they've opened and a cake of some sort. And that's feast. No, it's not. It's dinner. If you're going to do a feast, you're going to do pre-prep, and that's the only way you can pull it off and retain your sanity and your health on the day of. I had to learn that hard way a long time ago in a principality far, far away. But I learned the lesson, and I do pre-prep of lots of stuff. Everything that you braise or stew or pottage, anything that's cooked in a liquid is better the second time around anyway.
Yeah.
I think I would agree with both Philomena and Wolf Mom, and what Philomena said about the maintaining the integrity. In general, most meats I would prefer not to cook previously, because then when you recook it, like chicken, you cook it the first time, oh great, it's moist, it's perfect. You cook it a second time, it's just dried sawdust usually.
Yeah.
You know, steaks, you cook it and it's beautiful, you recook it, now it's leather.
Yeah.
So like some meats I don't like, but what Wolf Mom was saying about stews, braised meats, oh yeah, absolutely. Whatever makes your life easier.
Yep. If it doesn't compromise the integrity, nothing wrong with pre-cooking it.
And that's really the key. Some dishes taste better if they've had time for all of the spices to marinate. So yeah, some stews are going to taste better the next day. Casseroles work that same way. Some things you can't cook it ahead of time because it will, especially if it's a dairy base, a lot of times it does not reheat well. But like for the feast I'm doing in December, it's a German feast. We're going to have smoked sausages. Those have to be done ahead of time because yeah, while I can smoke them on site, the flavors marinate and are better if I've cooked them a couple of days ahead. I'm doing a tart. Well, that's definitely going to be cooked on site because trying to reheat it, the crust gets mushy and doesn't work well. So some things you have to do ahead of time for timing issues. Some things you have to do ahead of time for taste. Some things you have to do on site. So the whole I never reheat anything doesn't work. But then, yeah, it's very much boils down to your menu kind of idea.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can make it ahead and it doesn't compromise the integrity of the dish, make it easy on yourself and do it ahead, and then save your stress for the stuff that you need to cook on site.
Plus that way you get to cook it instead of someone else.
Isabel had a question about budgeting and how do you balance cost per person per course, total percentage of cost assigned to the different courses as well. Anybody want to chip in? I feel like I'm talking so much at all of you, so.
I'll start with this one. I always start with asking, whenever I'm asked to do a feast, my first question is, what's my budget and how many people are you wanting? The one that I'm doing in December, they gave me a budget, and then they said either 100 or 150. So I prepared a budget for both. Whenever we do a feast bid, we include the budget. So I'm given a number, and then I sit down and I look at what can I make that fits in that budget. And honestly, I prepared a feast bid one time and submitted it, and they came back to me and they said, we really like this, but we don't want it to cost this much. We need you to cut it in half. And then they were looking at it being like $4 a person. And I said, no, I walked away from it. So for the budgeting for me,
$4
is
a
what,
person for a feast?
yes. Right. Yeah, that's why I walked away from it. That's also the same people who served raw chicken to everybody, and my
Were you
children got
serving
food
scrambled
poisoning.
eggs and toast?
It wound up being off. There's a whole horror story that goes with that feast. But so I look at what I can do within the parameters that they give me, and if I feel like I can put out a good quality feast under the budget that I'm given, then that's what I do my bid off of. So I don't look at it necessarily per course. I look at, here's my total budget, and here's how many people I'm feeding, so how much per person, and then what I can do within that parameter, and that's how I approach it.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar. I mean, I will. How many people am I serving? With Trimeras, we're pretty much always used to, it was $10 per person, and I know we've gone to a system now where sometimes we have above the salt and below the salt, and they pay a little bit different price. Below the salt is usually a little bit cheaper, but you're getting a much simpler, possibly a one-course meal. If you're above the salt, it may be $15, but you're getting a little more higher end food. But you look at what you're going to be charging everybody and how many you're feeding and what your theme is. And then it's a matter of figuring out those costs. If you've got a dish that you really, really want to do, but it's going to be expensive, are there other side dishes that might not be as expensive that you could get those ingredients in bulk, that you can kind of take money from your side dish and move it to your main dish, to your protein? You really want to serve salmon to everybody. Well, then you do a much simpler side dish that you can save some money on. So it's a matter of just balancing it all together. What dishes do you want to cook? Maybe you pick one expensive dish, and then the rest is a much simpler. So it's just how. I don't think there's really a simple formula for how to do it, but it's really just looking at how many people you have, what money you're working with, and then what you want to cook. Gavin, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah. I don't know if this directly answers the question that you're asking. I kind of think it does, but to me, it's an important part that a lot of people don't think about is when you're balancing your cost. A big key to that is your resources. Down here, we've got a number of restaurant supply stores that either you can just walk into as a person off the street, or there's one that's called Restaurant Depot. You have to have a membership, but it's a free membership. And as a 501c3, the organization can get that membership for you. So you can go in there and buy restaurant bulk size stuff for a portion of the price of if you were to buy it at Walmart or Publix or something like that, a grocery store.
Costco's and Sam's also help too if you don't have access to like a Restaurant Depot.
But
that was my experience. Look, I've done a couple bids now, and they've went that way. And Restaurant Depot, our Barony, has a membership to it. I just want to see what people were thinking, because it was one aspect of it that I got just thrown in the deep end. Okay, make a feast bid. I winged it completely the first time. It came out good. But the second time was a lot more thorough and planned. And Restaurant Depot, Sam's, and Walmart, and other places were all involved. I just wondered if anybody else did it differently.
I have something to address with that. When I made a bid for pricing, looking at cost, I did the price off of Walmart, because we do have a restaurant supply store, and that's where I buy a lot of my stuff. I'm also in a produce wholesale group, and I can buy in bulk through them. But when I'm making my bid, I took it off of the Walmart prices, mainly because I can look up those prices online, and I don't have to make a trip somewhere to check out prices. But that also means I come in under budget when I go to make my meal, or I have some wiggle room to where if I go, oh, I want to make a specialty dessert for head table, I now have that extra room to do so. So I actually, when I make my budget, go with a little bit more expensive prices because Walmart's not necessarily in bulk. And then I'm buying in bulk, so I save some money that way. So that helps me come in under budget.
Yeah, it's really helpful now with so many stores being online and having online shopping versions, because you can actually cost compare without actually having to make a half a dozen trips to, 6 different stores to check the price of this. You can look it all up online and be like, oh, well, the best price is this store here. So that helps for cost comparison as well.
I had a lot of things from Walmart shipped in my house because shipping's free, so it saved me a lot of time in terms of shopping because it's delivered for nothing.
Yeah, and they're actually pretty decent. Like if you even when you do their shopping to pick up their grocery pickup, they actually pick out pretty decent produce for you. I'm surprised. We've tried it a couple of times, and I'm like, if I don't have to go walk through the store and deal with all this craziness, and I'd be like, I need 12 of this, 6 of these, blah, 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 and I just go pick it up and you put it in my car, I'm all for that.
That's my biggest concern with that is I like to squeeze the melon and make sure it's a good one,
I don't know if this is popping up everywhere, but Cisco has been advertising Cisco at home up here in New England, that they'll actually sell to you just as a person.
Oh,
wow.
I haven't
seen that.
Yeah, I haven't seen the full Cisco market, but I know because there's a Cisco warehouse just down the street from where I live that they've been doing basically a farmer's market kind of thing.
Oh, nice.
Well, I think, now this is going back 20 years, but I know at least one person who bought from Cisco to do a feast in Trimaris.
Yeah, I think Rurik did once. It's the hard. You did also, Wolf Mom?
Yeah, because Camp Ocala had a contract with Cisco. So all the cooks that worked on those feasts at Camp Ocala, Peregrine was in charge of the kitchen. We do team feast when it's a 3-day weekend. You give all your list of ingredients, your shopping list, to Peregrine. And then she would order everything she could from Cisco. And she would meet the Cisco truck on Friday morning or sometimes Thursday afternoon, because Ocala was great that way. She would meet the truck. She would pay for everything out of the feast budget. And then you didn't have to worry about anything. All those bulk produce. I need 6 cases of melons. I don't want to have to haul those in my little 6-foot Toyota pickup truck because then I won't have room for my tent. So it worked really, really well, and we never had a quality issue. We only had one issue with Cisco. They were supposed to provide 2 cases of olive oil, and either they were out and they didn't tell anybody, or because it was never paid for, so they had to have been out, we assume. And Saturday morning, we discovered that there was no olive oil in the house. So, and from Cali, you guys know.
Basically, olive oil is easy to get ingredient.
To get to any sort of grocery store. So we sent out the emergency calls. Everybody stop on your way to site this morning and get a large quart bottle or more, however much you can spare, to pick up a bottle of olive oil. And we had plenty by the time all was said and done. But yeah, Cisco is a great thing. If the camp that you're using has a contract with them, they will often let you piggyback onto their account because you're paying COD.
Unless your camp is Camp Lala Long Drive, and they don't want you to do anything.
That's a completely different issue.
Oh, that you need a trailer and a dually to haul everything you need to cook at La La Long Drive. Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a horrible kitchen to do.
I mean, it's not the worst
kitchen, but it's not great.
It's not Indian Springs.
Back to the original question about how do you budget things. I have a sort of formula based on how we in Trimaris do things. The Feast Crat is usually responsible for traveler's fare on Friday night, Saturday morning breakfast, Saturday night feast, and Sunday food.
Usually
Usually
just
means
toss the
leftovers.
leftovers out.
Right. We're not responsible for lunch anymore. We finally made it very clear to the kingdom that if you want us to serve 5 meals on $8 a head, because that's what it was when we finally made the argument work. If you want us to cook 5 meals on $8 a head, then you're gonna get hamburgers for feast, because it wasn't doable. So now that the feast price mandated by the kingdom, because that's what we're limited to for kingdom feast, the kingdom sets the feast price. So now what I do is I allocate for traveler's fare 50 cents per head, and you have to swag the number that you think you're going to feed, because sometimes it's 130 and sometimes it's 10. It's weird. So that's why we usually make something soup-like, stew-like.
Yeah.
Maybe some
Traveler's fare is
side.
always something. Yeah. Easy
Nothing
peasy.
too complicated, and something that you can, that's why I do soup, because you can do that ahead of time, freeze it in plastic bags, throw it in a pot when you arrive on site, and it's good to go. At 50 cents for travelers, no more than $1, sometimes even 75 cents for breakfast, because breakfast food is usually grain-based and fairly cheap. And then all the rest of that feast money goes to the feast itself. The Sunday morning is always leftovers. Take some home.
Okay,
Unless
see,
you're a good feast crack, you don't have any.
this whole thing to me is crazy. In Onstiora, feast is just Saturday night feast. We don't do any of this other stuff. So I'm like, what is wrong with you people?
Well, in Trimaris, we have gone to some people now.
Different
Will sort of, some people will farm out and they will ask people to do traveler's fare for them. They will ask somebody to come in and do breakfast. But oftentimes the money for those is still coming out of your feast budget.
See, okay, in Onstiora, we have the feast budget is just for Saturday night feast. That you pay for feast when you come in gate, and that's just for Saturday night feast. And a lot of times what you pay is not even the budget the Feastocrat was given, and that's caused some issues. We've actually gone to saying you should not be trying to make profit off of feast. Profit comes from gate, not from feast, and that we've kind of resolved. But as far as Friday night dinner, Saturday breakfast, Saturday lunch, all those, that if the autocrat wants to provide those things, they ask someone to do a tavern. And then you buy dinner and Friday dinner, Saturday breakfast, that stuff if you want, or you bring your own food and cook like you're supposed to at camp. I'm sorry, but I'm sitting here going, what is wrong?
But we're also, I mean, in Trimaris' camp, you know, they don't really have areas for people. I mean, if you have an above ground fire pit, you can do it, but there's not a lot of areas for campers to set up and cook
And
their own stuff.
many people in Trimaris, they don't camp anymore.
Right. And then you day trip, you just bring sandwiches.
Oh yeah. It's like it is here too. An inn is a separate thing from a feast. Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of.
I did
stewards
taverns
now.
in Onstiora.
kind of farming out, and they'll ask somebody to do traveler's fare and maybe ask it as far as a donation, because you can do a very simple stew or soup for pennies, and it's not much to ask people to do a donation for that, to donate a dish for that. And somebody else will do the breakfast, maybe the same thing, but you can do breakfast.
Well,
you can do breakfast pretty cheaply.
A lot of our newcomer guilds will wind up doing the Friday night travelers fair, because that's a really great way for them to get all the newcomers who are hitting site, if they're camping, to find one centralized location to hang out. It's a great way then for the more experienced players to come through and introduce themselves in a really more laid back attitude. But yeah, a lot of our events have gone to being day tripping as well, where it's just Saturday, in which case people eat breakfast before they hit site Saturday morning. They bring their lunch, which can be, sandwich, a lot of times is chips and sandwiches. And then you do Saturday night feast, and then you go home. So at that point, you don't need all those different meals.
Yeah.
We have turned in the Barony, we have had to turn to doing day events, which, let me tell you, darn near started a revolution. But our camp, the only camp that was close to us, close enough to really bother with, has priced themselves out of the market for the daily amount that they're charging. It's crazy pants. So what we have done is we have gone to day events, and the feast steward does a day board. They're at 10 o'clock in the morning, something pastry-like, breakfasty, brunchy kind of thing comes out, and it sits there for a couple of hours, and then at noon, a bigger meal type thing comes out, and then at 2 o'clock, another course, if you will, comes out that may be something different. And then at 4 o'clock, we have tea and cakes, and you can drink what you want.
Dude, I need to start going to these events.
Cookies. What we did at Michaelmas a couple of years ago is things got kind of slow in the afternoon. We didn't have a whole lot of fighters, so the lists didn't last anywhere near the time that we had scheduled them for. So at 3:45 on Saturday afternoon, I go to the Crowns and I say, look, they're done fighting out there. They're done. They're laying around out there. They put their armor away. How about we take dessert, which was tea and lots of really nice homemade baked goods. Why don't we do court with tea an hour early? And we lined up tables, and the aisle coming into court was divided by the tables. It was delineated by the tables, so everybody could go past on their way to come into court and pick up something to drink and something sweet to eat, and everybody loved it, and it was great, and we were out of there completely cleaned and done by 6:30. Life was awesome.
A lot of our
But it was
kingdom level
revolutionary.
events will have a sideboard luncheon, but that's still done by someone else. The autocrat will ask one person to do the sideboard luncheon, and then someone else to do your feast, and it's two different budgets. So we don't tend to have a lot of overlap. I have occasionally, if it's going to be a smaller event, offered as Feastocrat to do a sideboard or a brunch sideboard meal and then the feast, but that's usually when it's going to be a small event and it's more of a like Yule family get together kind of thing, and not a big coronation type feast.
Flora, did you want
Dinner in chambers with the family.
I think Flora had her hand up, but you're on. Oh, there she is.
I was just applauding the story there. Stay on mute, but I'm loving all the stories. Some good ones here.
I do have a question for other, I guess, anybody who's not in Trimaris, since Trimaris is well represented here. Are you guys finding that people, I think we've started to get people here are kind of pushing back against the and I know Wolf Mom is a proponent of this, pushing back against the large 5 courses, so much food takes so long. Do you find that your populace is kind of set and that that's what they expect and demand? I'm always curious because I think we as feast stewards can sort of lead the way and help to change the populace's expectations, or we're the ones cooking the food. If we say you're getting 3 courses, you're getting 3 courses. So do you guys find that there's sort of expectations from your populace that they want the full 5 courses with all this food? We sometimes get people who complain that it takes too long and they don't want to sit for 2 hours and have a feast.
So in Onsteora, the timing issue is more of a concern than the number of courses. I've been to a lot of feasts that had 3 courses. I've been to a lot of feasts that had 5. I've been to a couple that had 6 or 4, but for us it really boils down to the time. We don't necessarily mind a feast that takes 2 hours to eat, as long as there's not huge gaps of space in between each course. If you send out a soup course, about the time somebody's mostly done with that bowl of soup, we expect that next course coming out. One of the absolute worst feasts I was ever involved with, and I wasn't even involved with it initially, I was oh my God, they need help in the kitchen, please go help them type thing. And that's where my camp tunic comes from, because I got sugar cookie grease all over it, and now it's a kitchen tunic. It was a good linen court tunic before that, but
we all have those stories.
Right. But there were huge gaps in between the first course and the second course. There was like 30, 40 minutes with people sitting there going, we're hungry, where's the food? And we're talking the first course was olives, bread, cheese, and the second course was, I don't even remember, it was such a big nightmare. But so in Onsteora, at least, that's the big deal. We don't mind a feast taking an hour and a half. That's about the longest most people want to sit, is an hour and a half. But if there's 30 minutes in between courses with nothing going on, we are out of there, and we will gripe about it for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that is poor planning on that person's part.
Yeah, that's poor planning right there.
The whole thing was
especially
poor
when it's like 38 degrees in Florida. I know that's nothing for some places, but 38 degrees in Florida, half an hour sitting there is not wonderful.
Yeah.
I have a timekeeper. I have a timekeeper in the past that their job is to time exactly 12 minutes from the moment the first course goes out to the main tables. Right after high table is fed, as soon as that course goes to the high table, they get 12 minutes before the next course is going out. Because if you let a human sit for more than 20 minutes, it's a rule, it's physiology. Their stomach, which they have now pounded food into because it's your first course and they're hungry, their stomach in 20 minutes will tell them they're full, will tell their brain they're full, and then they don't want to see food anymore. So I push food hard, course after course after course, 12, no more than 15 minutes between plate.
Yeah, I do the same thing with figuring out like how long it's going to take to plate and how long you need to serve it, and factor that in as far as getting it out, because by the time when they're starting to deliver that first course, you should be starting to plate the second course and getting it ready. And then like Wolf Mom said, 12, 15 minutes, and then boom, that next course is out the door.
Yeah,
I try to design, I think we're coming up on time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just noticing Aubrey in the chat said something about cold dishes putting in bowls and being held. Pre-plate, please, pre-plate. It makes that 12, 15 minute mark so much easier.
No, this is an answer to the question about lunch coming up for feasting with COVID times. I was talking about ways that you can set up a buffet so that people can walk through and serve themselves without you having to have servers.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, well, and And in Callantyre, it's a lot like in Onsteora. It's not so much that people mind to having a longer feast, as long as they don't have to wait, but also they don't really care if it's 3 removes or if it's 5 removes, as long as they get full. Because depending on who the feastocrat is or who the feast steward is, I mean, we have some feast stewards that like to send little bitty amounts out in hopes that people will ask them for more. And then there are those of us that go, get this out of my kitchen. This is this remove, get it out of my way. And, you know, so as long as they're not hungry by the end of the feast, as long as they feel satiated by the end of the feast, they don't care if it's 5 removes or if it's 3 removes. So, you know, it kind of depends on if you have somebody that's planning 4 bites per person, as opposed to just sending out the bowl of stuff. That can make a difference too, as you know.
I will say in Onsteora, we don't like to ask. I mean, we will ask if there's more if we're still hungry, but we don't necessarily like to. So if you're going to do it that way, where you want to do your first serving and then want people to ask if there's more, you need to have your servers offer. You know, go, hey, there's still more bread in the kitchen. Would anybody like more bread? Or there's still soup or whatever.
We've had hall stewards do that before and make announcements like, hey, if you're really enjoying this, we do have extras if anybody wants some. But typically, I don't think we do a lot of bringing out extras because we're, like Wolf Mom said, we're trying to get the 5 courses out the door and done in an hour and a half.
Right, and that's what we do. We tend to send it all.
I think those of us who are really, really, really experienced at doing feast, portion control every course.
Oh yeah.
Every dish is tightly portion controlled, so that by the time you get to course number 4, they're only getting an ounce. They're getting an ounce of this and a half an ounce of that, and the portions get smaller as you go through your courses, because you know that you're going to lose half your diners after the second. They may sit there and drink and yap. They're not going to eat. And then at the 3-course mark, you're going to probably lose 70%, maybe a little higher. But again, they will just stop eating because they can't anymore because they pigged out on the first 3. So everything that I do is so tightly portion controlled that when I'm done with my feast, I have a half-a-gallon bag of leftovers of all courses.
This is why I do not like to do a bread course as the first course, because they come into dinner, they come into feast, and they're ravenous because half of them probably didn't want to pay for the fundraiser lunch. And so they're hungry because they haven't eaten since breakfast, and that loaf of bread is on the table, and they're just shoving it in their mouths because they're hungry. And by the time the first course or the first hot course comes out, they're full. So if I do a first course that's like nibbles, like cheese and nuts and pickles and olives, like just little nibbles.
The American diet, the way we eat, especially when we go out to eat. Bread is one of those rare things that all humans, because of how we developed evolutionarily, will eat completely unconsciously. Your brain has nothing to do with it. You eat it completely unconsciously until it's gone.
And then bread has the problem that it inflates, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I won't serve bread in a course unless it's soup that needs something to mop up the bowl.
Yeah.
And then they get a 2-ounce portion of the homemade bread that's appropriate to the dish, and that's it.
I think in Onsteora we have a habit though. We know that bread's on the table, but we don't fill up on it because we always have bread. I mean, it just always is in your first course.
Oh no, not in Trimaris, man. If there's bread and butter on the table, they're going through that stuff like it is candy, and they want more.
Well,
if it's gone and they're asking for seconds, 5 minutes after it hits the table.
But so we have like my starter that's going to be on the table before feast officially starts is bread and butter, but it's also cheese and pickled vegetables, and then my very next course is soup, and the soup will happen as soon as everybody gets seated and we officially start. So the soup and the bread really kind of go together. Just the bread's there before, so there's a little bit of a gap. But in honesty, we tend to not fill up on that bread because we know the meat's coming and we wait for the meat. But we are the South, so.
You need to come to Trimaris and teach our Trimarians not to fill up on the bread, man. Because if bread and butter is on the table, by the time the first or second official course hits, that bread is gone, and they're looking for more.
Yeah.
I hate to
give them
interrupt,
chicken.
While I'm enjoying the conversation, I really need to open the next room.
Yep, I thought that we were at time.
Yeah, I have to like get the cheesy goodness ready here, and so thank you. I'm so sorry to have to. I was really enjoying the conversation. I hate to be that person. So
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Understood.
And I can
Thank
take
you.
emails if anybody wants to ask questions. So have a good day.
You too. Thank you.